am Sophia, 29, female, and he cheated on me in our apartment, so I rented it to his ex. It sounds like the plot of a revenge movie, and in many ways, that's what my life became for a brief, intense period. Alex, a charmingly ambitious real estate agent, had swept me off my feet 4 years prior. Our apartment, a sun-drenched space with exposed brick and large windows overlooking the bustling city, felt like the physical manifestation of our blossoming relationship. We'd picked it out together, painted the walls a soft, comforting gray, and filled it with pieces that reflected our shared tastes. It was our sanctuary, the backdrop to countless happy memories, or so I believed. Our relationship, initially passionate and full of promise, had started to show subtle cracks in the past year. Alex's work hours became increasingly erratic, his phone a constant companion he guarded with almost comical secrecy. He'd come home late, often with vague excuses about client dinners or last-minute property viewings. I, a freelance graphic designer who mostly worked from home, would wait up for him, the silence of our apartment growing heavier with each passing hour. When I gently voiced my concerns, he dismissed them with practiced ease, turning the blame back on me for being insecure or not trusting, his dedication to his career. There were other little things, too. A lingering scent of a perfume that wasn't mine on his clothes, a sudden interest in restaurants he'd previously scoffed at, a new, almost nervous energy about him. I'd pushed these doubts to the back of my mind, clinging to the belief in the man I loved, the future we'd talked about, marriage, a little dog, maybe even a family someday. Our apartment, in my mind, was the first step towards all of that. Then came the night I found the earring, a small, delicate silver hoop, nestled between the cushions of our sofa. It wasn't mine, I don't wear silver. The dread that washed over me was immediate and visceral. It was the confirmation of the nagging doubts I'd tried so hard to ignore. That night, when Alex came home late, smelling faintly of wine and looking just a little too pleased with himself, I confronted him. The truth, when it finally spilled out, was uglier than I could have imagined. He hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been having it right there in our apartment, the place I considered our safe haven. His initial denial quickly crumbled under my quiet but firm accusations, replaced by a shocking lack of remorse and a swift departure, leaving me alone in the suddenly tainted space we once shared. His callousness, his expectation that I would simply pack up and leave, ignited a fire within me. Heartbreak morphed into a cold, determined resolve. He had cheated on me in our apartment, and I would make him regret ever stepping foot in it again. The days following Alex's confession and abrupt departure were a blur of shock, grief, and a simmering rage. Our apartment, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a crime scene, every corner whispering reminders of his betrayal. The sofa where I found the earring became a focal point of my pain, the place where my trust had been shattered. Sleep offered little escape, my nights haunted by replays of his lies and the crushing realization of his deceit. He'd sent a few perfunctory texts in the days after he left, mostly logistical, asking about splitting bills and the lease. His assumption that I would simply relinquish the apartment, the place we had both legally committed to, fueled my growing anger. This wasn't just about the infidelity, it was about his complete disregard for my feelings, his expectation that I would quietly disappear and let him move on without consequence. My friends rallied around me, offering comfort and support, urging me to move on, to find a new place, to heal. But a different kind of plan was taking root in my mind. The lease was in both our names, but I was the one who had handled most of the paperwork. I contacted the landlord, a kind, elderly woman who had always liked me. I explained that Alex had moved out and that I intended to stay, assuring her that I would continue to meet all the rental obligations. She was sympathetic and agreed to transfer the primary responsibility of the lease to me. Now that I had secured the apartment, the gears of my unconventional revenge began to turn. I thought about Alex, about his personality, his insecurities, the things that truly mattered to him. He was ambitious, yes, but also deeply concerned with appearances, with maintaining a certain image of success and desirability. The thought of him realizing what had happened in our apartment, the sheer audacity of his betrayal, and the fact that he expected me to simply walk away, fueled a desire for a poetic justice he wouldn't soon forget. I remembered snippets of conversations with Alex over the years, casual mentions of his past relationships. One name kept resurfacing, Brooke. She was his serious girlfriend before me, someone he had dated for a significant amount of time. I vaguely recalled him mentioning their breakup, something about growing apart, But now, through the haze of my anger, a different memory surfaced, a fleeting, almost dismissed comment he had made about messing things up with her. A seed of an idea began to sprout. What if Brooke knew the truth? What if she knew about Alex's pattern of behavior? I started doing some discreet digging online. It wasn't difficult to find Brooke. Her social media profiles indicated she had recently moved back to the city after a few years away. She was a marketing specialist, seemingly successful and independent. A bold, perhaps crazy plan began to form. What if I could turn the place of my heartbreak into a constant, living reminder of his infidelity, a poetic twist of fate he could never escape? The idea of renting our apartment to his ex-girlfriend took root, a dark, satisfying seed of revenge. The immediate aftermath of Alex's departure left a gaping hole in the silence of our apartment. It felt vast and empty, despite being filled with our shared belongings. The physical space, once a comfort, now held the ghostly echoes of his lies and her presence. I spent the first few days in a fog of disbelief, wandering from room to room, touching objects that held memories, each one now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal. The anger, however, was a more potent force than the grief. It simmered beneath the surface, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Alex's callousness, his assumption that I would simply pack my bags and disappear, fueled this rage. He had not only cheated on me in our home, but he expected me to surrender it without a fight. That sense of entitlement, that utter lack of respect, solidified my resolve. My plan to rent the apartment to his ex, Brooke, was still just a seed of an idea, a whisper of a possibility. I knew very little about her, only the vague details Alex had let slip over the years. I remembered her being described as intelligent and driven. The pieces started to align in my mind. If Alex had cheated on me in our apartment, what was to say he hadn't done something similar in his past? I decided to take a calculated risk. I found Brooke on LinkedIn and sent her a polite, professional connection request. To my surprise, she accepted within a day. I waited a few more days, letting the connection sit, before sending her a message. I framed it as a professional networking opportunity, mentioning my freelance graphic design work and complimenting her on her marketing career. We exchanged a few messages, keeping it light and business-related. Then, I decided to broach the topic of her move back to the city. She mentioned she was looking for an apartment. This was my opening. I casually mentioned that my lovely apartment in neighborhood was going to be available soon. I described its features, the great location, the wonderful landlord. I deliberately kept Alex's name out of the conversation. Brooke expressed interest, and we arranged a virtual tour. As I showed her around the apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a sense of reclaiming the space, of taking ownership of my narrative, but there was also a pang of sadness, a reminder of the life Alex and I had built there. I carefully avoided any mention of Alex, focusing solely on the apartment itself. Brooke loved it. She said it was exactly what she was looking for: great light, spacious, and in a vibrant neighborhood. We discussed the lease terms, and she seemed eager to move forward. It was only after we had tentatively agreed on the rental arrangement that I decided to reveal the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. In a carefully worded email, I mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the apartment was previously shared with someone she might know, Alex's last name. I held my breath, waiting for her response. Her reply was swift and filled with a mixture of surprise and a distinct undercurrent of something else. Recognition. We scheduled a call. It was time for the moment of truth, the point where my subtle manipulation would either succeed or fall apart. The stage was set for a conversation that would potentially change both our lives and deliver a poetic justice Alex could never have anticipated. The phone call with Brooke was charged with a nervous energy. Her initial surprise at the mention of Alex quickly morphed into a cautious curiosity. I started subtly, not wanting to scare her off. I spoke of a recent difficult breakup and my decision to find a new roommate to share the apartment. I painted a picture of a lovely space becoming available due to unforeseen circumstances. Brooke was polite but reserved, asking practical questions about the lease and the apartment's history. It was clear she was intrigued but also wary. I knew I had to tread carefully. I decided to share a little more, framing it as a shared, unfortunate experience, without initially revealing the full extent of Alex's betrayal in our specific apartment. I mentioned that my relationship with Alex had ended due to irreconcilable differences and that it had been a painful time. I spoke vaguely about his tendency to be less than honest in relationships, alluding to past patterns without going into explicit details of his cheating on me in our home. I could sense a shift in Brooke's demeanor, a flicker of understanding in her voice. Then I decided to be more direct, though still careful. I mentioned a few inconsistencies I had discovered towards the end of our relationship, vague references to betrayals of trust. I didn't explicitly say he cheated on me, but I painted a clear enough picture of infidelity and disrespect. Brooke listened intently, her questions becoming more probing. It was clear that some old wounds were being reopened. Finally, she asked the question I had been waiting for. What exactly happened, Sophia? You mentioned Alex wasn't always trustworthy in relationships, was there? Another woman. I paused, taking a deep breath. Yes, Brooke, I said softly. There was, and it happened. Here, in this apartment. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then, Brooke's voice, now laced with a raw mix of anger and a sad familiarity, broke through. He cheated on me too, she said quietly. Years ago, it ended things for us. The connection was immediate, a shared understanding of Alex's manipulative and hurtful behavior. I didn't need to say anything more about my specific situation in the apartment. The implication was clear. Over the next hour, Brooke and I talked openly, sharing our experiences with Alex. The similarities were striking: the same vague excuses, the same emotional distance, the same pattern of infidelity. A bond formed between us, a shared understanding of having been wronged by the same man. By the end of the call, Brooke's wariness had completely vanished, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and a hint of something else. A flicker of satisfaction at the poetic twist of fate. She was no longer just a potential tenant, she was an ally. She agreed to take the apartment, eager to start fresh in a new space that unknowingly held the echoes of Alex's repeated betrayals. The stage was set. My plan, initially a fragile hope, had solidified into a tangible reality. Alex had cheated on me in our apartment, and now his ex-girlfriend was going to live there. The irony, the poetic justice, was almost too perfect. The day Brooke officially moved into the apartment was surreal. Helping her unload her boxes felt like reclaiming the space, purging it of Alex's lingering presence. We shared stories and knowing glances, a silent understanding passing between us. She was excited about the apartment, the fresh start it represented, completely unaware of the full extent of the poetic justice that was about to unfold. I had decided to wait for the right moment to reveal everything. A few weeks passed. Brooke settled in, making the apartment her own. I stayed in touch, offering help with settling in and answering any questions she had about the neighborhood. We were becoming friends, bound by our shared history with Alex, a bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. Then the opportunity arose. A mutual friend of Alex and mine, Liam, was having a housewarming party. I knew Alex would be there, eager to show off his new, successful life post-breakup. I also knew Liam had invited Brooke, unaware of the tangled history between them. It was the perfect storm, the ideal setting for the unveiling. I confided in Liam beforehand, explaining the situation and my plan. He was shocked but ultimately supportive, agreeing to play his part in ensuring the evening unfolded as planned. At the party, Alex arrived with a new girlfriend on his arm, radiating an air of smug contentment. He spotted me across the room and offered a curt nod, clearly expecting me to be miserable and alone. I smiled serenely back, a secret knowledge dancing in my eyes. Later in the evening, Brooke arrived, looking radiant and confident. As she mingled, Liam subtly steered her towards Alex. The moment their eyes met was palpable. A flicker of recognition, then surprise, then a dawning understanding crossed their faces. Alex's new girlfriend looked confused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Liam, ever the gracious host, made introductions. The conversation started awkwardly, filled with forced pleasantries. Then, Liam casually mentioned Brooke's new apartment, remarking on how beautiful and conveniently located it was. "Oh, where is it?" Alex asked, a casual curiosity in his voice. "It's an apartment building name." Brooke replied, her gaze steady on Alex, the one with the exposed brick and the great city view. Alex's smile faltered. A look of unease flickered across his face. He knew that apartment. Small world, he said, his voice a little too tight. I used to live in that building. Really? Brooke said, her tone deceptively innocent. Which apartment? Apartment, our old apartment number. Alex replied, his eyes darting nervously between Brooke and me. A beat of silence hung in the air. Then Brooke's lips curved into a knowing smile. She looked directly at Alex, her voice calm and steady. "You know, Alex," she said, "Sophia told me you had excellent taste." The implication hung heavy in the air. The knowing look between Brooke and me, the subtle dig, the shared history that Alex thought he had buried it all, came crashing down around him in that moment, in front of our mutual friends. The unveiling had begun. The secret of his repeated betrayals, the poetic justice of his ex-girl, friend living in the very apartment where he had cheated on both of us, was now out in the open, a delicious, slow burn of exposure. The air at Liam's party crackled with unspoken tension after Brooke's pointed remark. Alex's face flushed crimson, his attempt at nonchalance completely shattered. His new girlfriend, sensing the awkward undercurrent, looked from him to Brooke and then to me, her confusion evident. A few of our mutual friends who had witnessed the exchange started exchanging curious glances. Liam, bless his heart, subtly steered the conversation towards past relationships, creating an opening for Brooke to share her history with Alex. "Alex and I dated for quite a while years ago," Brooke said, her voice casual but with a hint of steel. "It didn't end well, unfortunately." She paused, then looked directly at Alex. There were some trust issues. Alex shifted uncomfortably, trying to interject, but Brooke continued smoothly, her gaze never wavering. "It's funny, isn't it, how some people never really change their patterns." She directed this last comment towards me, a silent acknowledgement of our shared experience. The whispers started, spreading like wildfire through the party guests. People who had only known snippets of the story were now piecing together the larger picture. The fact that Brooke was living in Alex's old apartment, the apartment he had shared with me, was a detail that didn't go unnoticed. Later in the evening, as the party thinned out, Brooke and I found ourselves talking in a quiet corner. "Thank you, Sophia," she said softly, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "For everything. For the apartment, yes, but more for the understanding. It's validating in a strange way to know I wasn't alone." I smiled, a real, heartfelt smile for the first time in a long time. "Me too, Brooke, me too." Meanwhile, Alex was cornered by a group of our friends who were now pressing him for answers, their earlier assumptions of a simple breakup with me now replaced by suspicion and disapproval. His attempts at deflection and denial fell flat in the face of the undeniable truth. Brooke, his ex, was living in our old apartment, a detail that spoke volumes. The following days brought a cascade of repercussions for Alex. Word of his behavior spread through our wider social circle. His new girlfriend, understandably, ended things with him. His attempts to explain himself were met with skepticism and a distinct lack of sympathy. The carefully curated image of the successful, desirable bachelor he had tried to project crumbled under the weight of his repeated betrayals. His discomfort reached a peak when he ran into Brooke at our local grocery store. The awkwardness was palpable, the unspoken history hanging heavy between them. He tried to engage in polite conversation, but Brooke's polite but cool demeanor made it clear that she knew the full story and had no interest in rekindling any kind of connection. The encounter left him flustered and visibly shaken. My plan had worked. The act of renting our apartment to his ex had created a constant, living reminder of his infidelity, a poetic justice that extended far beyond a simple act of revenge. It had exposed his patterns, validated Brooke's past pain, and ultimately freed me from the lingering bitterness of his betrayal. The silence in my apartment was no longer filled with the echoes of his lies, but with the quiet satisfaction of a justice served in the most unexpected and deeply personal way. The aftermath of the housewarming party and the subsequent revelations rippled through our social circles, leaving Alex isolated and his reputation tarnished. His attempts to downplay the situation or paint himself as a victim fell on deaf ears. The shared understanding between Brooke and me, the undeniable fact of her living in our old apartment, spoke volumes more than any of his weak excuses. His real estate career also suffered. Word of his personal life and his treatment of women subtly made its way through professional networks. Trust is paramount in his line of work, and his credibility took a significant hit. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling to close deals and that his once promising trajectory had stalled. Brooke, on the other hand, found a sense of closure and empowerment. Living in the apartment, a space that had once been a symbol of Alex's betrayal to me, became a testament to her resilience and a quiet form of reclaiming power. We continued to build our friendship, sharing our journeys of healing and moving forward. There was a unique bond between us, forged in the fire of shared experience, a mutual understanding that transcended the pain Alex had inflicted. For me, the satisfaction of my unconventional revenge slowly gave way to a deeper sense of peace. The anger that had fueled my plan dissipated, replaced by a quiet strength and a renewed sense of self-worth. I focused on my graphic design work, pouring my energy and creativity into building my freelance business. The apartment, now truly mine again, became a sanctuary of my own making, filled with light and positive energy. I started dating again, cautiously but with an open heart. The experiences with Alex had taught me valuable lessons about trust, communication, and recognizing red flags. I was no longer willing to settle for anything less than genuine respect and honesty. The story of Alex, Brooke, and the apartment became a sort of urban legend within our old social circles, a cautionary tale whispered at gatherings. He had cheated on me in our apartment, expecting me to simply disappear. Instead, I had orchestrated a poetic and deeply personal form of justice, turning the very place of my heartbreak into a constant reminder of his deceit. In the end, I didn't just rent the apartment to his ex. I rented him a permanent space in his own history, a reminder of the consequences of his actions. And I, Sophia, moved forward, empowered and free, leaving the ghosts of his betrayal behind within those familiar, sun-drenched walls. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.